Children of the Sunflower. It was a beautiful, sunny day in the small town of Newbark. The grass was a vibrant green, and the sea to the east sparkled a beautiful, deep blue. A small house bathed in the golden light of the sun as its rays pierced an upstairs window. Inside, the beam reflected off a television screen, right into a young boy's eyes. He tried to cover his face in his sleepy state, but then his brain woke up and he remembered what day it was.
I get my Pokemon today!
Popping out of bed, the boy hurriedly dressed and rushed downstairs where he found his mom waiting.
Good morning, Haruto. I see you've gotten up all on your own for once. Can't imagine why that might be.
Haruto rolled his eyes.
You should brush your hair, though. You look like you just got out of bed.
I did just get out of bed.
That is no reason to go around town looking like it.
Haruto sighed.
Okay.
He started to march back to the stairs to go up and get a hairbrush.
And when you're done, you can come have some breakfast.
But Mom...
You don't want to start your journey as a Pokemon trainer on an empty stomach.
Fine.
But wait, that's not right, is it? The sky was dark. The nearly black clouds covered the entire sky and cast a gloomy shadow over the small town of Newbark. Strong winds were bending trees and causing waves in the sea to the east. Water splashed over the grass and even reached a small house that did not sit very far from the sea. Lightning flashed, and the accompanying crash of thunder startled a young girl awake in an upstairs bedroom of that house. Her heart racing, the girl looked around the dark room, slightly confused about the lack of light.
Is today the day I get my Pokemon?
Uncertain if it was actually day, the girl slowly got out of bed, dressed, and headed downstairs where her mom was waiting.
Morning, Hanako. Guess the storm woke you up. The way you sleep, I'm kind of surprised that even did the trick.
Hanako rolled her eyes.
You should go up and brush your hair. It's the big day today.
Can I have breakfast first?
Why don't you go grab the brush and I'll help you out while you eat?
The girl nodded.
Okay.
She started for the stairs but stopped when her mom spoke again.
You should bring down your bag, too.
But it isn't packed.
Well, then you'll need to do that, too, before you can come have breakfast.
Ugh, fine.
A few minutes later, Haruto was back downstairs. His hair still a little tangled, but better than it had been. After taking a seat, he started scarfing down his breakfast, and his mother swooped in behind him to brush out the rest of his green hair.
Ow!
Hold still.
I'm trying.
Not hard enough.
I can't with you pulling so hard.
Well, if you had done it properly, I wouldn't have to be doing it now.
She stopped and looked down at her son's hair.
Are you sure you'd want me to cut it shorter before you head out?
Mom!
All right. I just thought it would make things easier.
Hair fully brushed and breakfast consumed, Haruto was enduring a long hug just outside the front door in the fresh summer breeze.
I'm going to miss you.
Me too, Mom, but I'll visit.
And call. Don't forget to call.
Of course.
All right, then.
Haruto's mother held his shoulders and looked down at her boy. Her eyes were glistening with tears she was working to hold back.
I love you, Haruto.
Love you too, Mom.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Finally released, Haruto started off on a not-so-long journey toward the lab of Professor Elm. He looked back and saw his mom still standing outside the door watching him go. She waved, and he waved back. And once he reached the door, he looked back one more time and was pretty sure he saw her still there.
At least she didn't try to walk me over here,
he said to himself. Then he entered the lab. A few minutes later, Hanako was back downstairs with a hairbrush and a hastily packed bag with items spilling out of it. She tossed the bag onto a chair and then sat at the table to begin eating. Her mother shook her head as she took position behind her daughter to brush her pink hair.
What?
Your bag.
What about it?
It isn't packed very well, is it?
Well, I was in a little bit of a hurry.
You wouldn't have been if you had packed it last night when I told you.
She sighed.
I thought you were going to be more excited about today.
I am excited.
If you say so. We'll finish up and then get your bag packed properly, all right?
Breakfast consumed, hair done, and bag actually packed, Hanako stood at the open front door, staring at the pouring rain.
You might want this umbrella, too.
Yeah, I think I might. Thank you.
You'll stop by sometimes, right? And call?
Of course, Mom.
I'll miss you, sweetheart.
Hanako's mother placed a hand on her daughter's cheek. Her eyes glistened with barely contained tears.
Good luck, Hanako.
Thanks.
I love you.
I love you too, Mom.
Popping the umbrella up, Hanako stepped into the stormy weather outside. Professor Elm's lab wasn't far at all, but it felt like an entire journey in that weather. Hanako gave her mom a wave and plunged forward, doing her best to deflect the angled rain from pelting her along the way. Once she reached the door to the lab, she glanced back toward the home she had grown up in and found it blurred by the rain.
This is some day to start,
She said to herself. Then she entered the lab.
Ah, welcome, welcome. I'm glad you made it.
Professor Elm said excitedly as the child walked into his lab. A few steps in, and Haruto's foot slipped a little on a small puddle on the floor. Regaining his footing quickly, he finished approaching the table where Professor Elm had set up 3 Pokeballs. Hanako shook off the umbrella as best she could and closed it up before entering too far into the lab. She leaned the dripping contraption against a counter as she approached the table where Professor Elm had set up 3 Pokeballs.
All right, let's begin.
Professor Elm said. He peered over his glasses at the newly arrived trainer and didn't say anything else for half a minute. He almost seemed to be staring straight through the poor child.
So we have 3 choices laid out in front of you. There is Chikorita.
Elm said, pointing at the first Pokeball. When he pointed to the next one, he said,
Then there's Cyndaquil. And finally, we have Totodile.
The professor clapped his hands together.
Which one will it be?
The new trainer stepped forward and looked at each Pokeball very closely. A sudden movement off to the left caught the kid's eye, but a glance upward revealed only a bunch of random lab equipment and a window on the wall. Turning attention back to the table, the new trainer hummed in thought, trying hard to make a final decision. They all seemed like interesting Pokemon. Finally coming to a conclusion, a hand reached up toward one of the balls, and Hanako said,
I choose Chikorita.
Haruto's hand closed around the first Pokeball and he plucked it up. Hanako's hand hovered over the Pokeball for a moment and then drifted over to the second ball. She couldn't tell if it had done it on its own or if she had subconsciously done it as she had second thoughts about going for Chikorita. Then she grabbed the middle ball and said,
Cyndaquil. I choose Cyndaquil.
Haruto looked down at his hand holding the Pokeball and then his gaze drifted over to the one housing Cyndaquil. He could have sworn he felt something brushed against his arm. It was almost as if something was pulling him toward a different choice.
Would it be okay if I changed my mind?
Change your mind?
Elm asked.
As in, you want a different Pokemon?
I think, no, never mind. Forget I said anything.
The professor gave Haruto a quizzical stare. After a moment, he shrugged and turned to grab something.
All right, miss. Now that you've chosen your Chikorita, I have just a few Pokeballs to hand over to you, and this.
Elm turned back around and handed over a Pokedex.
As you catch more Pokemon, it will fill out details of the various creatures which will help in my research. It should also have all your details listed in there, which you can find if you just push this button here.
The screen the professor pulled up displayed the various badges found in the Johto region, as well as information about Haruto, such as his name and hometown. Just as he was glancing over the image of himself, a reflection of sunlight cast a glare over the screen. Something about the picture seemed off, and he quickly readjusted his view so he could get a better look. Turned out there was nothing odd about it at all, but he could have sworn, for just a moment, his hair had been pink. A loud crash outside the far window distracted Haruto from his confusion. He quickly turned to look to see what had made the noise, and was it just because he had been thinking it before? But did he just see something pink duck away out of sight?
Did you see that?
Haruto asked Elm.
Maybe. I think there might be someone outside spying on my research.
That answer sounded strange to Haruto. What could a Pokemon professor be researching that a spy would be interested in?
Take your Cyndaquil and head out the front. I'll take the back way and we'll see if we can't corner whoever's out there.
Haruto nodded and did as Elm said. Moving cautiously, the boy slipped out the front door, his foot sinking slightly in the damp soil right outside. Staying on tiptoes, he creeped along the edge of the building, through dry, tall grass, and peeked around the corner. There were some large boxes stacked along outside. One of them was tipped over on the ground, spilling out mostly old and damaged-looking equipment. That must have been what made the noise. There was some more movement near the boxes, and Haruto knew the spy must still be hiding there, waiting to do some more spying. Haruto inched closer, 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 and then jumped out and shouted at the lurker. Elm leapt into the air, screamed, and crashed into one of the stacks of boxes, knocking even more over.
Oops, sorry, Professor.
Elm waved it off.
No, it's okay. I should have let you know that I was back there. I was just picking up some strands of hair, as it likely belongs to whoever was spying.
He lifted the few strands, and Haruto could see clearly in the bright sun that he had been right. He had seen something pink outside the window.
Are you sure?
Professor Elm asked, looking at the trainer. Hanako looked at her hand and then back to the Pokeball with Chikorita in it, and then back to the Pokeball with Cyndaquil she was holding. Something felt off about what had happened. She very nearly chose Chikorita, and she didn't know why.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Why?
Elm stared at the Chikorita ball quizzically.
I'm not sure. I just, for some reason, thought you were going to pick the grass type. Maybe it's just because of your name being plant-related.
Hanako nodded slowly.
Yeah, that could be.
The professor shrugged and turned away to grab something.
All right, mister. Now that you've chosen Cyndaquil, I have just a few Pokeballs to hand over to you. And this.
Elm turned back around and handed over a Pokedex.
As you catch more Pokemon, it will fill out details of the various creatures, which will help in my research. It should also have all your details listed in there, which you can find if you just push this button here.
The screen the professor pulled up displayed the various badges found in the Johto region, as well as information about Hanako, such as her name and hometown. Just as she was glancing over the image of herself, the lights in the lab flickered and the screen of the Pokedex fuzzed out for a second. Something about the picture seemed off, and she quickly readjusted her view so she could get a better look. Turned out there was nothing odd about it at all, but she could have sworn, for just a moment, her hair had been green. A crash of thunder rocked the lab, accompanied by a flash of lightning, and, in that moment, Hanako thought she saw something outside the window. It might have been a trick of the light, or maybe it had been her mind dwelling on what she had just thought she saw in the Pokedex. But she thought she had just seen someone with green hair out there.
Did you see that?
Hanako asked Elm.
Maybe. I think there might be someone outside spying on my research.
That answer sounded strange to Hanako. What could a Pokemon professor be researching that makes someone willing to stand out in that storm just to get a glimpse?
Take your Chikorita and head out the front. I'll take the back way and we'll see if we can't corner whoever is out there.
Hanako raised an eyebrow. She wasn't feeling very inclined to go out in the pouring rain just to run into someone potentially dangerous. But she was also intrigued, and so she hurried outside, the warm, dry grass tickling her ankles as she did. Not wanting to spend too much time getting soaked and afraid the spy would get away, she hurried around the corner, each step sinking into the mud, and found nothing. Well, not nothing. There were a stack of boxes out there. There just wasn't a person. However, there were footprints. Comparing the prints to her own feet, she discovered that if it was an adult, then they had very small feet. Chances were more likely that it was someone closer to her own age. Suddenly, a stack of boxes nearby crashed down as a tall figure in white appeared. Hanako screamed.
Oops.
Elm said.
Sorry, miss.
Hanako clutched her chest, heart beating fast.
No, it's okay, Professor. I just thought maybe you were the spy, coming to attack for just a second there. But look, I found some footprints they left behind.
She pointed down at the ground, and just at the moment, the whole area lit up with a flash of lightning. It made it much easier to see that the footprints were not just close to Hanako's size, but that they were nearly identical. Glancing up, Haruto saw someone through the window. There was a girl with pink hair walking up toward the table where Professor Elm had placed the 3 Pokeballs.
Hey, Professor, look. I think the spy's stuck inside.
Haruto turned to look at the professor, but he wasn't there.
Professor?
The boy turned back toward the window and saw that Elm was already inside and was speaking with the pink-haired girl.
What the?
Inside, Professor Elm was handing something to the girl that Haruto had thought was a spy. The lights inside flickered, and the girl turned toward the window. Something wet landed in Haruto's hair, and then just as the girl was about to see him standing outside the window, she was gone.
Haruto? Haruto?
The boy blinked and shook his head. Glancing over, he found Professor Elm standing beside him with a concerned expression.
Are you okay, Haruto?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Professor Elm didn't look entirely convinced, but he didn't press the matter.
Very well. I have a favor to ask of you. Let's head back inside so I can get the case.
Sure, okay.
Haruto followed the professor back inside. The boys' foot splashed through a puddle as they headed toward the back of the lab where Professor Elm started rummaging around his disorganized desks, clearly in search of something. Glancing up, Hanako spotted someone through the window. There was a boy with green hair walking up toward the table where Professor Elm had placed the 3 Pokeballs.
Professor? I think the spy snuck inside.
Hanako turned to look at the professor, but he wasn't there.
Professor?
The girl turned back toward the window and saw that Elm was already inside and was speaking with the green-haired boy.
What in the...
Inside, Professor Elm was handing something to the boy that Hanako had thought was a spy. Light flashed off of it into the boy's face, and then he turned toward the window. The sound of tapping rain on Hanako's umbrella suddenly ceased. Then, just as the boy was about to see her standing outside the window, he was gone.
Hanako? Hanako?
The constant tap of rain on the umbrella thundered back into existence. Hanako looked to see who had said her name and found Professor Elm beside her, wearing a concerned expression.
Are you okay, Hanako?
What? Oh, I think so.
Professor Elm didn't look entirely convinced, but he didn't press the matter.
Very well. I have a favor to ask of you. Let's head back inside out of this storm first.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Hanako followed the professor back inside. She shook off the umbrella and closed it up as they walked toward the back of the lab. There, Professor Elm started rummaging around his disorganized desks, clearly in search of something.
Ah, here it is.
Elm turned around holding a strange, oblong container made mostly of glass.
I need you to visit Mr. Pokemon. He has made a discovery, and I want it brought back here so I can study it.
The professor handed the container to the young trainer standing before him.
You'll put it inside this case to keep it safe. Do you know where to find Mr. Pokemon?
The blank stare of the young trainer told Elm that the answer was no.
He lives in a small house just north of Cherry Grove City. Just head there, pick up the discovery, and bring it back in one piece. Think you can handle that?
The nod Elm was given was all the professor needed, and so, before the trainer even left, Elm delved deep into his work again. As Haruto started for the door, he noticed that something had changed. First was that there was no longer a puddle on the ground. But the second, and more important detail, was that the table where there had been 3 Pokeballs now only held 1. The boy glanced back to Elm and thought about asking him where the other Pokeball had gone. But, seeing him so engrossed in his work, he felt it would be better to leave him to it. So Haruto headed out the front door, ready to make his way to Cherry Grove City. As Hanako started for the door, she noticed that something had changed. First, there was now a puddle on the ground, near where she had rested her umbrella before. But the second and more important detail was that the table where there had been 3 Pokeballs now only held 1. The girl glanced back to Elm and thought about letting him know about the missing Pokeball. But, seeing him so engrossed in his work, she felt it would be better to leave him to it. So, Hanako headed out the front door, ready to make her way to Cherry Grove City. Haruto was well on his way along Route 29 to Cherry Grove City. The sun continued to shine on his adventures as he battled wild Pokemon with his Chikorita and made a failed attempt to catch a Pidgey. After getting into a clearing out of the tall grass, he decided to take a break underneath the shade of a tree. The sun was getting high and the temperature was climbing with it. Taking a sandwich out of his bag, he took a bite and then leaned against the trunk of the tree. He couldn't have asked for a better day to begin his journey. Once the sandwich was half eaten, Haruto felt he had rested long enough and climbed back to his feet. He looked to the west, which is the direction he had been heading, and he found it was nearly impassable with trees growing so close together and thorny bushes growing thickly around them. Instead, he was going to have to follow a more maintained path that twisted back and forth up a steep hill to get to where he wanted to go. Just as he was about to leave, there was a loud crack and a sort of echoing rumble afterward. It sounded like thunder. Despite the fact that he had already been enjoying the sunny day, he looked up, expecting to find dark clouds gathering, but it was still just as clear as before. Confused, Haruto looked around the clearing to see if he could find what had caused the noise. Leaves on the trees rustled and the tall blades of grass waved. There was the man he had passed by just outside the borders of Newbark, and he could see someone with their Pokemon near the top of the hill. Everything seemed as peaceful as when he had been sitting by the tree. There was no evidence that anything significant had happened at all. Haruto shrugged his shoulders and made for the hill. At the top of the hill, there was a path to the north. Thinking it might be quicker to get to Mr. Pokemon's place that way, Haruto headed onto the new route. It didn't take long to find he had made a mistake. What greeted him wasn't so much a route, but an enclosed field surrounded by trees and a cliff. The boy shook his head, annoyed at his decision, and started to head back. But then, something darted by somewhere in the trees. Haruto turned to get a better look, but couldn't see anything out of the ordinary.
Hello?
There was no response. Nothing moved, and nothing made a sound. Haruto stood completely still, staring into the darkness of the trees where he believed he had seen whatever it was. As he stood there, still and silent, he started to get an uneasy feeling. It felt like something was watching him.
Is anyone there?
After a few minutes of continued silence, Haruto slowly took one step closer toward the trees to try and get a better look. Then he took another. It was when he made his third step that something in the trees twitched. It was hard to discern what it was as it moved quickly and seemed to blend in with the leaves around it. What Haruto could tell was that whatever was in there, it wasn't human. Excited about trying to catch another Pokemon, Haruto released his Chikorita. Together they headed off in the same direction the creature had gone. Hanako was struggling her way through Route 29 to reach Cherry Grove City. Lightning and thunder continued to battle in the sky, and the rain made battling Pokemon challenging. After getting out into a clearing, Hanako was soaked from the rain-drenched tall grass. It had been a struggle just to get that far, but with the storm still raging, she didn't feel like she could take a break. She would have loved to take shelter under a tree, but the lightning was a concern in that regard. Still, she needed some food, so she opened her bag just long enough to snatch out an apple. Taking a bite out of the apple, Hanako looked around to see where to go next. Cherry Grove was located at the west end of the route, but that way was blocked by trees and thick overgrowth. Instead, she was going to have to follow a more maintained path that twisted back and forth up a steep hill if she planned to reach her destination. As she got ready to start the climb, there was a sudden burst of light. It wasn't lightning, but a ray of sunlight shining down onto the peak. The girl could still hear the rumbling thunder and the rain hammering atop her umbrella, and when she looked up, there was no sign of the sun. When she looked back to the hill, the light had gone. Confused, Hanako looked back up at the sky to see if there was any signs that the storm would break. But the wind picked up and thunder boomed even louder than before. Lightning branched across the sky, and in a flash, the girl could see there was another traveler atop the hill. In fact, she was pretty sure that it was where the beam of light had shone. She thought that maybe it had just been a Pokemon using a move up there that had created the light. Shrugging her shoulders, Hanako started up the hill. At the top of the hill, there was a path to the north. Hanako considered that there might be a shortcut to Mr. Pokemon's home that direction, and considered giving it a shot. Before she could, something caught her attention out of the corner of her eye. She looked over and saw that a woman was hurrying off toward the west, followed by a pink Pokemon. The girl tilted her head, wondering what the hurry was. Her guess was that whoever the woman was, she had been the one hanging out atop the hill. That most likely meant she wasn't just trying to get out of the rain.
Hey!
The woman and her Pokemon did not respond. They continued running and began to vanish behind the curtain of rain cascading down. Hanako's curiosity was piqued, and she ran after the woman. It was rough going on the slick grass, and Hanako almost slipped right down the hill. Unfortunately, it meant she lost sight of the woman and her Pokemon completely.
Where did she go?
Hanako slowed down to a walk and tried to see through the rain into the surrounding trees for any sign of the woman. It was next to impossible to distinguish anything with the constant movement of rain under the dark sky. The best Hanako could do was continue along the path toward Cherry Grove. As she drew nearer, the girl began to feel uneasy, as if she were being watched. She clutched tightly to the Pokeball that housed Cyndaquil as she stepped into the city. Chikorita sensed something up ahead and alerted Haruto. The boy stopped and looked carefully all around to see if he could find something out of place. knowing that what he was looking for blended in with the foliage. Glancing down at his Pokemon, Haruto saw it, discreetly lifting some vines and point to a spot on his left. The boy turned his head as slowly as possible to look. At first, he didn't see anything, but then the creature blinked a large blue eye. Not wanting to waste his chance, Haruto issued a command to his Pokemon.
Chikorita, tackle!
Immediately, the boy's partner Pokemon rushed off toward the mysterious creature. It leapt into the air and nearly made contact when another voice rang out from high above.
Confusion!
Chikorita was suddenly flying back toward Haruto as power was released from the camouflage Pokemon. Haruto caught his partner and was knocked onto his back from the momentum. From there, he could see the Pokemon he had been chasing fly out from the trees and up the tall cliff out of reach.
What Pokemon is that?
The boy wondered to himself. It stopped flying when it reached a woman who was standing at the edge of the cliff. She rested her forehead against the Pokemon and gave it a gentle pat with her hand. Then she turned to look down at Haruto.
Stop trying to follow me. In fact, it would be best if you forgot you ever even saw me or this Pokemon.
What? Why? What is it?
The woman placed her hand on her hips.
Really? I'm not going to tell you when I just told you to forget.
I would forget easier if you didn't make it so mysterious.
Rubbing the bridge of her nose, she looked back to the Pokemon beside her.
Epoch, confusion.
The green Pokemon moved closer to the edge and stared down at Haruto. Suddenly, he felt himself lift off the ground, spin around both sideways and end over end. Finally, Haruto was tossed backward where he landed hard on the ground and skidded to a halt right next to the entrance to that route. Attempting to climb to his feet, Haruto nearly tipped over, disoriented from the event. He stayed down on his knees instead and shook his head to try and clear it and regain equilibrium. By the time he looked back toward the cliff, he could tell that the woman and her Pokemon were gone. On the ground, Haruto's Chikorita was racing toward him. He gave the little grass Pokemon a hug and pat.
Are you okay?
The Chikorita didn't answer but twirled around and bounced onto Haruto again to indicate it was fine.
That was intense. I wish I knew what that Pokemon was and what that woman was up to.
The Chikorita stared off at the cliff at the end of the route as if it too were pondering the same things as Haruto.
Well, I don't think we're gonna get any answers just sitting here. Besides, Elm gave us a job to do.
Haruto got to his feet and was mostly steady. Chikorita watched him, unsure if he would fall again.
Shall we?
Chikorita stared off toward Route 29 and Haruto took that as a yes from the Pokemon. As they neared the borders of Cherry Grove City, Haruto and his Chikorita were confronted by a wild Sentret. The boy looked down at his partner and said,
All right, third time's the charm. Go, Chikorita.
Once inside the borders of Cherry Grove City, Hanako made straight for the Pokemon Center to finally get some relief from the rain. She was soaking wet, even with the use of her umbrella, and couldn't wait to dry off. Folding her umbrella, Hanako sloshed her way over to the counter and handed over her Pokeball with Cyndaquil inside. She didn't need to say anything as the nurse understood immediately what to do, leaving Hanako to get a room. Soon, Hanako was showered, in bed, and her clothes were set out to dry. She hoped that by morning she would be well rested and ready to go, and, if she was lucky, maybe the storm would finally be over. It wasn't over, at least not completely. When Hanako arrived back at the Pokemon Center desk and collected Cyndaquil, she could see that it was brighter outside than it had been the day before. There were still some distant rumbles in the sky, and rain was still falling steadily, just not as heavy. However, when she stepped outside and popped up her umbrella, she didn't hear any rain pattering against it. She tilted the umbrella back to get a good look at the sky and found it nearly cloudless and lightening up with still rising sun.
Weird,
she thought out loud. And then suddenly rain was falling on her face again, and the once clear sky was once again covered in clouds. The world was tinted a pale green.
Just great.
Despite the continued rain, it felt warmer than it did the day before, and Hanako was grateful for that small blessing. As she headed toward the northern exit of Cherry Grove, she stopped a passerby to make sure she was on the right track.
Mr. Pokemon lives up on Route 30, right?
Yeah, that's right. He's a little off the beaten path, though. You'll want to stick to the east.
Okay. Thank you.
Not a problem, miss.
More confident on where she was headed, Hanako left town and intended to follow the instructions she had just been given. But as soon as she stepped into the tall grass, a Pokemon leapt from its hiding place inside and launched itself at the girl. Hanako ducked and then quickly tossed out Cyndaquil's Pokeball.
Go, Cyndaquil! Tackle!
The fire Pokemon emerged and obeyed instantly. It launched itself at the flying creature that had startled Hanako and knocked the red and black thing out of the air. Balling up its fists, the bug Pokemon rose up and started swinging at Cyndaquil, landing one blow against the fire Pokemon's middle.
Tackle it again, Cyndaquil!
Racing around the tall grass, Hanako's partner hugged the wall of a short cliff. It ducked another blow from the red and black bug Pokemon, causing the thing to hurt itself by punching the rocky cliff. Then Cyndaquil took the opportunity to land that second tackle.
Alright, keep an eye on it, Cyndaquil, in case this doesn't work.
Hanako tossed a Pokeball toward the bug and it was instantly zapped inside. The ball shook once, twice, and then clicked into place. Hanako had caught her first Pokemon.
Way to go, Cyndaquil!
The fire Pokemon seemed pleased with itself, but soon it looked up at the rain a little disgruntled. Hanako raised Cyndaquil's Pokeball and called him back inside.
There you go. Safe and warm again.
Not long after the surprise ladybug attack, Hanako found that the path she was on had a handful of other Pokemon trainers battling one another. She was grateful they were distracted in that way so that she wouldn't be bothered. She only had the two Pokemon, and they were both a little tired after the battle they just had with one another. Unfortunately, they were hogging up the path that led farther north. While trying to figure out how best to get around them, Hanako noticed something else about the path. It was headed west and then north. But the man had said she needed to stick to the east side of the route. The girl turned around to see if there was another way she could go, and, sure enough, there was a grove of trees that would be easy enough to navigate.
I guess he did say it was off the beaten path.
Hanako made her way through and found herself battling a Pidgey along the way. It put up a tough fight, and when she was getting ready to catch it, the Pokemon flew away. She threw up her arms frustrated.
Well, at least I didn't waste a Pokeball on it.
It didn't take much longer after that to reach a clearing with a small house nestled back by some trees. A sign at the front of the building read, Mr. Pokemon.
I guess this is the place.
Reaching the door, Hanako was about to knock when something pink caught the corner of her eye. At first, she thought she had just caught a sight of her own hair, but then she spotted whatever it was hiding behind a tree a little deeper in the woods.
It's okay. I won't hurt you.
The Pokemon remained where it was, and Hanako thought about her words and how she had recently just battled a Pidgey and a Ladybug. If the pink Pokemon hiding in the trees had seen any of that, there was no way it would believe that she would not hurt it.
Wait. Aren't you the Pokemon that was with that lady? The one who
The door to Mr. Pokemon's house opened, and Mr. Pokemon himself stood in the doorway.
Welcome. You must be Haruto.
Hanako looked at the man for a moment, surprised by his sudden appearance. But then she turned to find pink Pokemon again. It was gone. Mr. Pokemon peered around the doorframe and looked off into the woods to see what Hanako was looking at.
What's out there, miss?
Huh? Oh, nothing. I just thought I saw... Wait. Who did you say I am?
Mr. Pokemon's head snapped back to look at Hanako, and he frowned as he tried to process what she had been about to say and what she had just asked.
Sorry, what was that?
Did you just call me something? I mean, were you expecting someone else?
Shaking his head, Mr. Pokemon stepped to one side to allow Hanako in.
No, just you, I believe. Professor Elm said he was sending a new trainer my way. I assume that must be you. Hanako, right?
Hanako frowned as well, very confused by what was going on and having trouble focusing due to her mind being preoccupied by the Pokemon she had seen in the woods.
No, I mean, yeah. Yes, I am Hanako, and the professor wanted me to pick something up.
Once Hanako was inside, Mr. Pokemon shut the door and made his way across the room.
Excellent. I'll grab it right now.
Without stopping, he called back to Hanako and asked,
You did bring an incubator, yes?
If that's what this is.
Hanako said, holding up the glass container Professor Elm had handed her. Mr. Pokemon peeked over his shoulder to see what she was holding.
Yep, that would be it.
Turning back, he pulled something out of a box that had some cushions inside. It was a very large oval-like object with an odd pattern across its surface.
And here is the egg.
Chikorita was sitting on top of the centret when Haruto finally threw the Pokeball. It struck the centret, and there looked like there was an expression of relief on its face when it vanished inside, finally free of Chikorita. The poor thing didn't even try to break out of its ball.
We did it, Chikorita!
In his excitement, Haruto hadn't noticed that his partner had wandered into some trees and was playing around in the foliage. Apparently the victory was not that important to the grass Pokemon, and it just wanted to play.
Enjoying yourself?
Chikorita looked up at Haruto, and it seemed as if she smiled.
I think I found a good name for you.
Haruto stated.
Foliage.
The Chikorita leapt and spun, seemingly pleased by the name.
Alright, now come on, Fol. We need to get going.
After another spin, the grass Pokemon rushed forward to walk along with Haruto as they entered Cherry Grove City. But, at the border where they were going to enter, someone stood in their way. She was a girl about Haruto's age, and she had pink hair. Her green eyes narrowed, and she pointed at the boy's Chikorita.
It was you! You stole the professor's other Pokemon.
Haruto's eyes widened. He was shocked to see the pink-haired girl in front of him. He hadn't gotten a good look at her when she entered Professor Elm's lab, but this girl had to be her. What was even more surprising to him is that she, the spy that infiltrated the lab, was accusing him of having stolen from Professor Elm.
Excuse me? I would never. Professor Elm gave me my Pokemon.
I don't think so, spy boy. Now give me that Pokemon, so I can bring it back to the professor.
Haruto raised an eyebrow.
What did you just call me? I'm not a spy.
Fire Edge! Go!
The girl tossed out a Pokeball and a Cyndaquil emerged, ready for battle. Chikorita was already out, and Centret, having just been caught, was in no condition to battle. Haruto pointed forward at the Cyndaquil, and then both he and the girl shouted out commands to their Pokemon at the same time.
Fire Edge! Tackle!
Both grass and fire Pokemon charged toward one another and collided. The world shook with an explosion of thunder. Haruto was suddenly getting drenched in a downpour of rain. The boy looked up at the sky, confused. The distraction would have provided an opportunity for the girl to have her Cyndaquil get the upper hand, but she too was distracted by the sudden change in weather. Remembering they were in a battle, both trainers commanded their partners to tackle again. When they collided the second time, the rain stopped just as suddenly as it had started.
What the?
Haruto swiped rainwater off his face and shouted at his Chikorita to tackle a third time. It was all he really knew how to do. Both he and his partner were inexperienced in battling. Fortunately, it seemed the same was true for his opponents. When the rain returned with the next collision, it was hard to ignore the pattern. Haruto knew that there were all kinds of interesting Pokemon with a variety of abilities, and that some were even able to change the weather. But it didn't seem like an ability that Chikorita or Cyndaquil were likely to have.
How are you doing that?
The girl shouted out at Haruto. The boy had begun wondering if his opponent had another Pokemon nearby that was creating the rain. It was the only other explanation he could think of at the time, but the girl's question collapsed that theory.
Me? I'm not doing anything.
The Chikorita and Cyndaquil continued to tackle one another, and each time the weather flipped from sunny to stormy to sunny again. Both Pokemon seemed evenly matched, and it was clear the battle would be decided by which one could endure the longest. Soon, both Pokemon were breathing heavy, and Haruto was sure that the end was upon them. One more tackle or two, and one, or maybe even both, would be defeated.
Look,
Haruto called out to the girl.
I don't know who you are, or why you needed to steal from the professor, but I'm sure if you just went and talked to him, it could all be worked out.
What? I didn't steal anything. It was you who was lurking outside the window.
Lurking outside? That was you. What are you even trying to?
Haruto didn't get to finish because the girl then shouted at her Pokemon to tackle again. He quickly commanded Foliage to do the same. The Cyndaquil and Chikorita charged forward, slower than before due to their exhaustion. Just as they were about to connect for what was probably going to be the last time, the Cyndaquil vanished. Haruto couldn't believe it. The girl had called the stolen Pokemon back. Had she conceded? Or was she going to make a run for it? The boy got ready to chase after her if she was going to run. He couldn't let the thief get away. But when he looked up, the girl was already gone.
How did you get away so fast? Did she teleport?
Whirling around, Haruto looked for any sign of the girl and found none. He started to wonder if she had been toying with him the whole time. It would have explained the accusation of him lurking outside the window at the lab when they both knew it had been her. That meant she might have been trying to throw him off with her question about the weather too. If she had a Pokemon that could teleport her away, then she could easily have also had a Pokemon that controlled the weather.
Who was that girl?
Hanako left Mr. Pokemon's house with the egg he had given her securely encased in the incubator. Her first thought should have been to head back to New Bark to deliver it. However, the mysterious pink Pokemon that had been hiding in the trees had preoccupied her mind, and she wanted to see if she could find it. First, she headed toward the eastern woods, as that is where she had seen it before. When there was no sign of it, she moved north along the tree line and started searching there. When she caught some movement, she risked going into the woods a little way, trying to be careful not to get lost in them. She couldn't locate what she had seen, but there was a sound of rustling leaves. Following the sound, Hanako tried to creep as quietly as she could. Unfortunately, there was a loud snap when she placed her foot on a twig, and immediately the rustling stopped. Whatever was out there had definitely noticed her. Not moving from her spot, Hanako slowly reached for the Pokeball with Cyndaquil. As she did that, she peered around through the trees for any sign of the Pokemon that had been causing the rustling noise. She had been sure that the sound had been somewhere to her left, but when she scanned the area, she finally caught sight of something to her right. There were a pair of large, bright green eyes, and they were staring at her. Neither trainer nor Pokemon moved for a long moment, and then the green eyes blinked and the Pokemon flew off in the opposite direction. That's when Hanako saw that was definitely the pink creature she had been looking for. Not wanting it to get away again, the girl took off running through the woods after it. But she only made it 3 steps before her foot caught and she went crashing down into the dirt, face first. Hanako groaned from the pain and over losing the pink Pokemon again. Climbing back to her feet, she looked to see what she had tripped over, but couldn't find anything particular in her way. The girl was about to conclude it was just her own clumsiness when she saw something slithering along the ground. Watching it travel through fallen leaves and twigs, Hanako didn't get a good look until it popped out just in time to vanish into some bushes. When it entered into them, it made the same rustling sound she had heard earlier. Not wanting to waste any time, Hanako quickly unleashed her Cyndaquil toward the noise and shouted out a command.
Cyndaquil, tackle!
The fire Pokemon ran forward and leapt for the bushes. A vine whipped out and cracked against the Cyndaquil, but to little effect. In fact, the vine seemed to retreat quickly after contacting the fiery edge of Hanako's Pokemon. After Cyndaquil vanished into the bushes, there was a cry from whatever Pokemon was hiding in there. The bushes shook violently as the 2 Pokemon continued to battle. Occasionally, Hanako saw vines shoot out and could hear the snaps as they whipped at her Pokemon. Meanwhile, the edge of the bushes were being singed from contact with Cyndaquil's fiery back. After a bit, the bushes went quiet.
Cyndaquil? Are you okay?
Hanako stepped closer toward the bushes, worried about the silence. An image popped into her mind of vines twisting around her partner's neck and choking it out. Beginning to panic, Hanako was about to charge in when there was a sudden cry and a Pokemon burst out from the bushes and ran right under Hanako's legs. Cyndaquil ran out a second later and gave chase and nearly knocked over Hanako. Stumbling and twisting around, Hanako tried to locate the small, yellow-headed Pokemon that rushed by. Thanks to Cyndaquil being hot on its tail, she was able to locate the spindly Pokemon. Grabbing up one of the few Pokeballs she had left, Hanako launched the ball through the trees and toward the fleeing Pokemon. The ball connected with a tree right by the grass Pokemon's head, just missing it. The girl growled in frustration and grabbed another Pokeball. She watched the Pokemon's path closely, lined up her shot, and then chucked the ball. This time it connected directly with the Pokemon, knocking the poor thing over right before it was zapped inside. The ball shook 4 times before the seal finally clicked signaling the Pokemon was captured. Hanako leapt in excitement.
Yes, I caught another Pokemon.
She worked her way over to where the Pokeball was resting on the ground. Cyndaquil was next to it, keeping an eye on it until Hanako arrived. The girl patted the Cyndaquil on his head.
Way to go, Cyndaquil. You did great.
Picking up the ball, Hanako examined it and then pulled out the one that held the ladybug she had caught earlier that morning.
You know,
She said, looking back at the fire Pokemon by her feet.
I should really start coming up with names for you.
The Cyndaquil looked up with what seemed to be a mix of curiosity and anticipation.
I think I'm going to call you Fire Edge.
She said as she thought about how the edges of him had burned her newly caught Pokemon. Then she looked at the ladybug and thought for a moment.
I'm still not sure about you. And this one,
She said, holding up her latest sketch.
it was hiding in and rattling the leaves around it. So I think Leafage would be a good name for this little Bellsprout.
Replacing the Pokeballs containing the ladybug and leafage, Hanako looked down at Fire Edge. She could see red lines from where he had been whipped, and there were some scrapes as well, probably from battling in the bushes.
I think it's time we get some rest, huh?
Fire Edge dipped its head as if nodding.
All right, hop back in.
Hanako said, extending the Cyndaquil's ball toward it.
Then it's back to the Cherry Grove Pokemon Center.
After the battle with the girl at the border of Cherry Grove City, Haruto's Chikorita needed some rest. His recently caught Sentret would need it too after foliage had worn it down. On his way, he stopped a passerby to make sure he had the right directions to Mr. Pokemon's place.
Hey, do you know if Mr. Pokemon lives on the route north of here?
Oh, on Route 30? Yes, well, sort of. He lives near the edge of the woods.
Oh, alright. Thanks.
Sure thing, mister.
Once inside the Pokemon Center, Haruto dripped across the floor on his way to the counter to hand over the Pokemon. The nurse gave a curious look at the boy's drenched clothes, clearly wondering how he had ended up in such a state. Not wanting to try and explain the odd weather he had encountered in his battle, Haruto just left the Pokemon with the nurse and went to find a room to clean up in. After a shower, the boy changed into some dry clothes. He was tired, and the bed in the room tempted him to get some rest. But after his detour to a dead-end route and the battle that held him up, Haruto felt like he needed to make up some lost time. When Haruto arrived back at the Pokemon Center desk and collected his 2 Pokemon, he could see that it was getting dark outside. He thought he could hear thunder rumbling in the distance too, suggesting a storm was coming. However, it seemed to have already arrived when he stepped outside. Thunder roared, lightning lit up the night, and heavy rain drenched the boy once again.
Just great.
Haruto groaned. And then suddenly the rain was gone, along with the thunder and lightning. Haruto looked up and saw a clear evening sky with a few stars just becoming visible.
What just happened?
The fact that he had just been soaked again and it was getting late, Haruto was reconsidering his choice not to get some sleep at the center before continuing his journey. But he still felt the need to catch up after the detours and distractions, and, chances were, the weather would just hit him again if he tried to start afresh another time. Leaving town, Haruto tried to remember what the passerby had said about where Mr. Pokemon lived. His thoughts were almost immediately interrupted as a strange face dropped right down in front of him, startling the boy into falling backwards onto the ground. Given a little distance, Haruto recognized the Pokemon, and he quickly threw out his Pokeball.
Go, Foliage, tackle!
The grass Pokemon emerged and obeyed instantly. It launched itself at the dangling creature and knocked the green thing up into the air. The bug Pokemon swung back down, still attached to its thread, and smacked right back into the Chikorita, freaking it out.
Alright, Foliage, try Razor Leaf.
The Chikorita hunched down and took aim at the thread its opponent was dangling from. She launched sharp-edged leaves upward, cutting the thread just as the bug Pokemon swung forward, dropping it hard into the tall grass. Foliage took the opportunity to land another tackle.
Okay, now stand back, Foliage.
The Chikorita obeyed, resisting the impulse to tackle the bug a third time. Haruto threw a Pokeball at the bug Pokemon, and it was instantly zapped inside. It took a few shakes before the lock clicked and signaled to Haruto that he had now caught a Spinarak.
Good work, Foliage.
The grass Pokemon simply rolled around in the tall grass as it seemed fond of doing. Haruto grinned, happy she was enjoying herself. He only let her play a little longer before beckoning her to follow.
Come on, it's getting dark. Let's go find Mr. Pokemon.
When Hanako arrived at the Pokemon Center, it seemed the rain was letting up a bit. Wet and tired again, she turned her Pokemon in as before, cleaned up, and got some sleep. She was sure that the dissipating rain meant the storm would be over in the morning. It wasn't. It was hard for Hanako to tell if it was the return of the rumbling thunder or her own grumbling that she heard as she stormed down to the lobby. Wind was howling outside and the rain near horizontal in its movement. Lightning would sometimes flash so rapidly it would create a strobe effect.
I should have just kept going yesterday.
Hanako mumbled to herself as she waited for her Pokemon at the desk. When the nurse delivered Hanako's Pokemon, she tried to warn her against going out into the storm. But Hanako had already taken up enough time getting the egg, and she really wanted to get it back to Professor Elm. Besides, it didn't seem the weather was ever going to cooperate for her. Once she was reunited with her trio of Pokemon, Hanako left the center and didn't even bother with an umbrella. There was no way it would block out even half the rain, and the wind was so strong it would probably have stolen it right from her hands. Instead, Hanako put her head down and trudged forward. There wasn't anyone else outside in town. So when Hanako spotted someone at the edge of town where she was headed, it surprised her. As she got closer, she was shocked to see the curiously dry person had green hair just like the spy back at Professor Elm's lab. She narrowed her green eyes and pointed at the Chikorita he had beside him.
It was you! You stole the professor's other Pokemon.
Hanako hadn't gotten a good look at the spy back at Elm's, so she couldn't be sure if it was him just by the green hair. However, he did have a Chikorita, which was one of the other Pokemon that had been at the lab. Then the boy also looked really scared that he'd been discovered. That proved his guilt.
Excuse me? I would never. Professor Elm gave me my Pokemon.
Hanako scoffed.
I don't think so, spy boy. Now give me that Pokemon so I can bring it back to the professor.
What did you just call me? I'm not a spy.
Fire Edge! Go!
Hanako, noting that Chikorita was weak to fire, tossed out her Pokeball with her Cyndaquil inside. It emerged ready for battle, and the girl still had 2 more Pokemon at the ready, should she need them. Hanako pointed forward at the Chikorita, and then both she and the boy shouted out commands to their Pokemon at the same time.
Fire Edge! Tackle!
Both fire and grass Pokemon charged toward one another and collided. The world shook with an explosion of thunder. The rain that was dumping on Hanako suddenly stopped. The girl looked up at the clear, sunny sky, confused. The distraction would have provided an opportunity for the boy to have his Chikorita get the upper hand, but he too was distracted by the sudden change in the weather. Remembering they were in a battle, both trainers commanded their partners to tackle again. When they collided the second time, the rain resumed just as suddenly as it had stopped.
What is going on?
Hanako swiped rainwater off her face for all the good it did her, and shouted out at her Chikorita to tackle a third time. It was all she really knew how to do. Both she and her partner were inexperienced in battling. Fortunately, it seemed the same was true for her opponents. When the rain stopped with the next collision, it was hard to ignore the pattern. Hanako knew that there were all kinds of interesting Pokemon with a variety of abilities, and that some were even able to change the weather. But it didn't seem like an ability that Cyndaquil or Chikorita were likely to have.
How are you doing that?
The girl had begun wondering if her opponent had another Pokemon nearby that was turning the rain on and off. It was the only other explanation she could think of at the time.
Me? I'm not doing anything.
The boy shouted at Hanako. The Cyndaquil and Chikorita continued to tackle one another, and each time the weather flipped from stormy to sunny to stormy again. Both Pokemon seemed evenly matched, and it was clear the battle would be decided by which one could endure the longest. Soon, both Pokemon were breathing heavy, and Hanako was sure that the end was upon them. One more tackle or two, and one, or maybe even both, would be defeated.
Look,
The boy called out to Hanako.
I don't know who you are, or why you needed to steal from the professor, but I'm sure if you just went and talked to him, it could all be worked out.
What? I didn't steal anything. It was you who was lurking outside the window.
Lurking outside? That was you. What are you even trying to?
Hanako didn't let the boy finish and shouted at Fire Edge to tackle again. The boy quickly commanded his Chikorita to do the same. The Cyndaquil and Chikorita charged forward again, slower than before due to their exhaustion. Just as they were about to connect for what was probably going to be the last time, the Chikorita vanished. Hanako couldn't believe it. The boy had called the stolen Pokemon back? Had he conceded? Or was he going to make a run for it? The girl got ready to chase after him if he was going to run. She couldn't let the thief get away. But when she looked up, the boy was already gone.
How did he get away so fast? Did he teleport?
Whirling around, Hanako looked for any sign of the boy and found none. But in that rain, it was going to be hard to see very far. Hanako wondered what the boy had been up to, trying to accuse her of being a spy and a thief. She had clearly accused him already, so it wasn't like he could convince her he was innocent. Perhaps he had simply been trying to confuse her to get an advantage.
Who was that boy?
Not long after the Spinnerack dropped in for a surprise, Haruto found that the path he was on wound its way north and there wasn't a house in sight. He frowned, sure he had heard the professor correctly and that Mr. Pokemon lived on Route 30. He had even confirmed it with that girl in town. Haruto turned around on the spot looking for any sign of civilization. As Haruto was about to give up, he noticed there was an area of trees not nearly as dense as the rest of the forest. It seemed like he could navigate through here without getting lost. The girl in town had said Mr. Pokemon lived at the edge of the forest, and the boy realized that could mean on the inside edge as opposed to the outer edge, as he had assumed. However, it was getting dark outside, and it was even darker among the trees.
I'm really starting to wish I had waited until morning to do this.
Taking a deep breath, Haruto started into the woods and nearly fainted when a Hoot-Hoot swooped by him. Startled, the boy threw out a Pokemon on reflex and shouted out commands as fast as he could, not taking the time to think about pulling punches to catch the Pokemon. The Hoot-Hoot was nearly knocked out before it flew away.
Yeesh, that was scary.
It didn't take much longer after that to reach a clearing with a small house nestled back by some trees. A sign at the front of the building read, Mr. Pokemon.
This must be the place.
Relieved the house was there, Haruto went to the door and started knocking. Just then, something green caught the corner of his eye. Glancing over the woods, he found it easily because it was glowing in the dark, and, if he wasn't mistaken, the green creature hiding behind a tree was the same Pokemon that he had tried to catch earlier in the day.
So, we meet again.
The Pokemon remained where it was. Haruto started to look around to see if there was any sign of the woman from last time. It was impossible to tell with how dark the woods were.
Hey lady, are you out there?
The door to Mr. Pokemon's house opened, and Mr. Pokemon stood in the doorway looking a little alarmed.
No need to shout. I was on my way, Hanako.
Haruto looked at the man for a moment, surprised by his sudden appearance, but then he turned to find the green Pokemon again. It was gone. Mr. Pokemon looked a little annoyed at being woken up and then ignored.
Are you just going to stand out here all night?
Huh? Oh, us. Sorry. I just thought I saw... Wait a second. What name did you just call me?
Mr. Pokemon's brow was furrowed as he tried to process Haruto's question through his sleep-deprived mind.
Sorry, what was that?
You called me something. Were you expecting someone?
Shaking his head, Mr. Pokemon stepped to one side to allow Haruto in.
No, just you, I believe. Professor Elm said he was sending a new trainer my way. I assume that must be you. Haruto, right?
Haruto frowned, very confused by what was going on and having trouble focusing due to his mind being preoccupied by the Pokemon he had seen in the woods.
Yes, I'm Haruto. The professor said you have something that I need to pick up.
Once Haruto was inside, Mr. Pokemon shut the door and yawned as he made his way across the room.
Very good. I'll grab it right now.
Without stopping, he called back to Haruto and asked,
You did bring an incubator, yes?
Is that this thing?
Haruto asked, holding up the glass container Professor Elm had handed him. Mr. Pokemon peeked over his shoulder to see what he was holding.
Yep, that's it.
Turning back, yawning again, he pulled something out of a box that had some cushions inside. It was a large, oval-like object with an odd pattern across its surface.
And here is the egg to go inside it.
Haruto left Mr. Pokemon's house with the egg securely encased in the incubator. His first thought was to head right back to New Bark to deliver it to Professor Elm. However, the mysterious glowing Pokemon he had seen in the trees still took up a lot of his thoughts, and he decided to see if it might still be around.
He looked over to where he had seen it before, and when there was no sign of it, he thought he would check the trees behind Mr. Pokemon's house. As Haruto rounded the corner of the house, he was met with an inexplicable sight. There was nothing there, not a tree, not a fence, not even any ground or sky. It was completely empty, as if someone had yet to fill in that part of the canvas that was being painted. It was so eerie, he decided to turn right back around and just head back to Cherry Grove. But he couldn't. There was nothing behind him either. Everywhere Haruto turned, he was met with the exact same emptiness.
What's going on?
He felt disoriented as there was nothing to lock his eyes on. He had no sense of direction, and when he looked down, his feet were not planted on anything. It seemed like he was floating, but Haruto didn't feel like he was. Taking a step seemed like a terrifying idea, so the boy just stayed where he was. Or at least he thought he was, as there was no sense of movement.
What do I do? How can I get out of here?
And then there was something. A familiar glow appeared in the distance. Haruto was sure it was the same one he had seen in the woods, although at times, instead of green, it seemed more pink.
Hello? Can you help?
The glow floated closer and closer until Haruto could see its large, bright blue eyes and the green, plant-like body. Beside the glowing Pokemon was the woman Haruto had met the first time he encountered the Pokemon.
I'm sorry about this.
The woman said.
It's all my fault.
After another spin, Hanako was sure there was no way she would be able to find the boy in that rain. Cyndaquil looked miserable standing in the downpour, and so Hanako called him back to his ball and decided to send out the Bellsprout she had recently caught. She figured the grass Pokemon might enjoy the water. It did. The Bellsprout twirled and frolicked in the stormy weather.
All right, Leafage, come on. We should get going.
Pausing, the Bellsprout looked up at Hanako with suspicion, as if it wondered if it really needed to obey.
The professor's expecting this egg.
Hanako pleaded.
We need to get it to him.
Leafage tilted its head to one side, studying the girl. Staring back at her grass Pokemon, Hanako was nervous about the glint in its eyes. Hanako wanted to head back west, taking a shortcut, but the Bellsprout slowly turned its head toward the north, keeping a wary eye on its trainer.
Don't you dare.
Leafage did dare, and broke out into a run. It wore an expression of maniac glee as it vanished into the nearby foliage. Hanako took off into the woods after the Bellsprout, trying to call it back into its Pokeball. As Hanako crashed into the trees, she found they provided some shelter for the downpour.
Leafage, this isn't funny. Get back here.
Hanako shouted out after the Bellsprout.
Can you even hear me? We need to get back to New Bark.
Hanako slipped and barely managed to stay standing by grabbing hold of some branches. The Bellsprout glanced back, wondering what the commotion was.
Please stop running.
Leafage shook its head back and forth and then darted away again, continuing its northern direction. The chase started getting more difficult as the ground seemed to start sloping up into a nearby climb.
Please stop. I really wish I knew what you were up to, or where you think you're going.
Suddenly, Hanako was chasing the Bellsprout across barren, rocky ground where the Pokemon crashed into a rocky cliffside. Leafage wobbled on its spindly root legs and nearly tipped right off the edge of a cliff. Hanako reacted on instinct and caught the Pokemon before it could drop. That's when she saw just how high the two of them were from the ground below. She felt dizzy and started to sway, and she nearly toppled over the edge herself when something grabbed her. She was yanked back away from the edge and landed hard on the ground, and quickly scrambled back away from the edge. Hanako shook her head, trying to clear it from the sense of vertigo that had hit her. Her hand absently patted Leafage as if trying to calm it down when it was really her heart that was racing. That's when she noticed there was a woman standing between her and the edge. The woman placed her hand on her hips. A mix of confusion and exasperation was apparent on the woman's face.
What are you even doing up here?
I was trying to catch my Bellsprout. It just ran off. I have no idea why it came up here.
Well, you really shouldn't be here. Not only could you have fallen, but there are some dangerous Pokemon around.
Almost as if that had been a cue, a pink Pokemon flew by and hovered next to the woman's shoulder. Hanako eyed it warily after the warning she had just been given. Then it dawned on the girl that she had seen that Pokemon and the woman before.
Wait, weren't you the one who ran off a couple days ago?
Hanako asked. The woman didn't say anything. She looked lost in thought, almost as if she were trying to work out a complicated math equation. At one point, she opened her mouth as if she was going to answer, and then froze for a moment before shutting it again. Looking out beyond the cliff, as if the answer were lingering out in the distance, the woman sighed. She turned back to the pink Pokemon beside her, and, after a while of staring at one another, she finally spoke.
It is all so confusing.
Hanako got to her feet and started dusting herself off.
What? What is so confusing?
Before the woman could expound, the pink Pokemon suddenly turned around and stared off into the woods to the east. It was acting as if it had heard something, but there hadn't been any sound that Hanako had detected. Hanako followed the Pokemon's gaze and tried to see into the rain-obscured woods, but there was nothing that stood out. The woman also looked and nodded as if she seemed to understand whatever was going on. Then the woman looked back over at Hanako.
Somehow, things have been changed. I tried to fix one thing, and it all went sideways.
Hanako ran a hand down her face, lost by the woman's lack of clarity.
You're really not making any sense.
That's because none of it makes sense.
What doesn't?
Any of it. The storm. The colors. You being here.
Hanako knew the storm had been odd, the way it seemed to stop randomly. She had no idea what the woman meant by the colors. But as far as Hanako being there, hadn't she already explained that?
I told you. I just followed Bellsprout running up that hill in the woods.
The woman looked back at Hanako, and she looked really confused by the girl's statement. Then she shook her head.
No, not you being here. I meant you being here.
The woman spread her arms as if to indicate a larger area. It didn't do anything to clear it up for Hanako.
Of course I'm here. Leafage led me here.
She copied the woman's gesture as she was in that whole area because of the runaway Pokemon.
I know, but that wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to happen. What I'm trying to say, Hanako, is that you aren't even supposed to exist.
What's your fault?
Haruto asked the woman who had approached him.
All of this?
The woman spread her arms to gesture at what the boy could only assume was all the emptiness around them. Turning around, Haruto grew disoriented again and almost toppled until he could see the woman and her green Pokemon again.
And what is this?
It isn't.
Haruto ran a hand across his hair, exasperated.
It isn't what?
Anything. It's nothing.
I can see that.
As soon as the words were out of his mouth, Haruto wondered to himself if that was even an accurate statement.
Can you see something that isn't there?
Unsure he wanted to hear the answer, Haruto asked another question.
Where did everything go? Where's Mr. Pokemon's house? Or the woods? Or anything at all?
The woman looked hesitant to answer.
I think it's still there. Just not for you. Not anymore.
If it was still there, then we should see it. Shouldn't we?
I don't really know.
The woman said.
I've never done this before.
Done what?
Gone back and tried to change things.
Haruto was getting frustrated. Trying to get answers from the woman felt like taking tiny baby steps, one slow movement at a time.
Gone back where? To change what?
Sorry, this is all new to me.
The woman answered.
I was trying to fix a mistake in my past, and it seemed to change more than I expected, so I'm trying to correct it.
The boy stared at the woman, not sure if he was understanding her right.
Are you saying you are from the future?
No, not at all.
That caused Haruto to breathe a sigh of relief. He wasn't sure if he could handle finding out time travel was possible right at that moment.
I mean,
the woman continued.
I guess. I kind of am. I've been there, but I'm not really from there.
Haruto groaned as the relief he had felt just moments before evaporated. Apparently the woman had traveled through time, and, it seemed, more than once.
How? How did you go to the future and back again?
The woman hesitated, and Haruto noticed her eyes flick over toward the green Pokemon momentarily.
I'd rather not...
It was that Pokemon?
Sighing, the woman nodded.
Yes.
Seriously? I mean, I've heard of Pokemon changing the weather, but changing time?
Haruto noticed the woman step back and her body tense up. Her eyes narrowed and a hand reached behind her back. When the woman spoke again, there was an edge to her voice.
I don't think Epoch changes time. It just provided me the means to do so.
The boy stared in amazement at the green Pokemon. He couldn't believe that a Pokemon had a power like that. He couldn't really think of any reason he would have to do so, but it was an interesting idea. The woman started to move around Haruto's right, which would eventually place him between her and the Pokemon. He turned toward her and saw a determined expression, and it finally clicked that she was about to attack him.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Haruto cried out. He threw his hands in the air and quickly backed up away from both the woman and the Pokemon.
What did I do?
Nothing yet.
The woman replied as she made her circle larger to still try and get around the boy.
Yet?
Haruto tried to process the meaning of that in light of the revelation that the woman had been to the future.
What am I going to do?
That caused the woman to stop.
What?
She shook her head as she realized what Haruto meant.
No, I didn't mean you were going to. It's just that you seem very interested in Epoch.
Of course I am. It has an ability that I've never heard of.
He looked at the Pokemon and then back at the woman. Then it clicked what she must have been thinking.
Wait, no. I don't want to take it.
The woman continued to watch Haruto suspiciously for a minute. She must have decided that maybe he was just innocently interested as she relaxed a little, though she still had one hand behind her resting on a Pokeball.
Okay, so you changed something in your past, you said.
Haruto asked, trying to put the pieces together.
And now that's changed something, which brought us here? Is this just the world, time, adjusting to these changes?
Sort of,
the woman said.
I'm worried that I might have erased you.
So,
Hanako said, trying to understand what the woman was saying.
you erased me? And yet, you didn't erase me?
Sort of,
The woman said.
I think there is a path you were supposed to be on, and my being here has caused you to wander off it. If you keep going, I think you might find everything suddenly missing. That's what happened, will happen, is happening to the other you.
Other me?
Yes, I think my meddling with time created a different version of you, and that you went off course too, thanks to Era and me.
The woman explained, gesturing to the pink Pokemon beside her.
And since I've wandered off course, it is like somehow going beyond the borders of a video game?
Haruto asked.
Like, nothing is programmed to be there, because no one is supposed to be there. It isn't part of the game.
I'm not really familiar with things like that. That sounds right, though.
How do we fix it then?
My theory is that we just need to get you back on the path you're supposed to be on.
But, you said there are two of me? How can we both be on the same path?
There aren't supposed to be two of you. But if you both are where you're supposed to be, then I think it will all come back together and you will just be one again.
Then I guess the question is, where am I supposed to be?
Where were you going before you met me?
Haruto had to think about that for a minute. The sudden vanishing of everything and the bizarre conversation with the woman had driven most of his previous plans far from his mind.
Well, I was trying to get a look in the woods behind Mr. Pokemon's house, and that's when everything went away. But I don't see how that has anything to do with you. But I seem to be off the path before you got here.
The woman frowned in thought.
But we met before, right?
Oh, yeah, but there's cliffs.
Okay, so where were you headed before that?
Oh, Mr. Pokemon's house. But I made it there. So wasn't I already back on the path?
That does seem to be the case.
The woman tapped her chin, trying to figure out how that interaction could have changed Haruto's direction.
Why don't you run through what happened at Mr. Pokemon's house?
Well, I had it here because Professor Elm sent me. I got the egg, like he asked, and left.
And that's it? Were you headed straight back to your professor's home after that?
No. I was looking for your Pokemon. I saw him in the woods before I went in, and I was wondering if he was still out there.
So that's it. Our interaction and Epoch's reappearance caused you to stray.
The woman clapped her hands together.
And let's get you back on the way to your professor. Where were you going before you met me?
I told you. I was chasing my rebellious Bellsprout, and so we ended up here. Then you showed up with your confusing story about time travel and changing the future.
The past.
Whatever.
Hanako threw her hands in the air, exasperated.
So, I don't think any of this has to do with you.
But it does. Don't you understand? You only exist because of something I changed. Somehow.
Yeah, I don't buy any of that. I remember growing up. I remember being excited to go on my own journey as a Pokemon trainer. I remember finally getting to Professor Elm's and choosing Cyndaquil. I didn't just pop out of nowhere.
I didn't say you popped out of nowhere. I'm saying something changed to make all that happen. The other you was the one who did those things before.
If me and other me are the same person and did the same things, then what makes you think there are two of me?
Because you're not exactly the same. The original you is...
No, forget it. I think you were hit by a Pokemon's Confuse Ray or something. None of this makes any sense. My life is not a scripted series of events. I get to choose where I go.
The woman was taken aback by Hanako's resistance to what she was telling the girl.
Hanako, I am not your enemy. I'm just trying to fix what I've broken. I'm not asking you to do anything you probably weren't already planning.
She gestured toward the egg in its incubator.
I assume you are trying to deliver that back to your professor, right?
Hanako eyed the woman suspiciously.
Maybe.
So why don't you just do that? It was a path you had already chosen. I am certain that from there, you will then make the choices you were going to make already, which sets you back on the path.
Shaking her head, Hanako said,
I might have planned to go that way, but then my path changed to chase leafage, which clearly had nothing to do with you. So maybe this is the path I'm supposed to be on.
Except that isn't right. You should be following the same route as the other you.
The same path as who now?
The other...
Don't say the other you. You started saying a name and it wasn't mine.
It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you head back to Professor Elm's lab. And you need to do it now.
Too bad.
The woman snatched Hanako's wrist and yanked her closer to the tree line.
We don't have time. Let's go.
Hanako dug her heels into the ground, trying to fight the woman's pull. The rain made the ground soft and slick, which hindered Hanako's efforts to anchor herself. Fortunately, the rain also made it hard for the woman to maintain a grip on the girl, and Hanako could feel herself slowly slipping free.
Stop fighting this. You need to go back to New Bark.
A flash of light streaked downward towards the cliffs, and with it came an explosion of sound and rock. Hanako felt the ground leave her feet, and she thought she was either falling or flying. She slammed down onto a rocky surface, bounced off it, and crumpled to the ground. She groaned in pain as she tried to sit up, the sky still pelting her with cold raindrops.
What happened?
She managed to push herself up into a sitting position, but still had to keep one arm on the ground to support her. The terrain around looked similar to the cliffs where she had been, but now there was a mountainous path that led to the north. Something made a sort of whimper nearby, and Hanako tried to find it through the rain. It wasn't until she saw a lump of mud start to rise that she had located the poor creature. As it started to crawl, the rain began washing some of the mud away, relieving Leafage, her Bellsprout. Reaching for the Pokeball, Hanako found it was missing, and she had probably lost it after the explosion tossed her through the air. Fortunately, the girl still had one left, and she decided to try and catch Leafage again. The Pokemon was in no shape to fight and was sealed into the ball quickly.
Looks like I'll need to get some more.
Slowly, Hanako got to her feet, wincing at the pain that shot through her body. She wasn't sure where she had ended up, but she knew that New Bark should be somewhere south of her. So, to avoid the woman that seemed determined to force the ideas of fate upon Hanako, the pink-haired girl trudged northward. Haruto followed the woman through the emptiness, and slowly the world started to return. Once the boy was back in front of Mr. Pokemon's house, everything seemed to be exactly where it was supposed to be.
That was crazy.
The woman nodded.
It certainly is a peculiar phenomenon.
Thanks for leading me out of it, miss.
Smiling, the woman gestured to the green Pokemon.
You really should thank Epoch here. Without the guidance of this Pokemon, we'd all be lost.
What kind of Pokemon is that anyway?
Asked Haruto.
I'm not really sure. I've only ever run into the one. It's either a new species or something very rare.
The woman looked at Epoch, pondering what it could be while she patted its head.
You should get going though, Haruto. You need to catch up to your path.
The boy nodded.
Right. Okay. Maybe I'll see you again.
Not saying anything more, the woman simply waved goodbye to the boy as she ran off. With the weather as nice as it was, travel was easy enough, and it did not take him long to reach the Pokemon Center in Cherry Grove. After resting up for the evening, he then returned to New Bark Town, utilizing some shortcuts along the route, and delivered the egg to Professor Elm, as was expected of him. After speaking with the professor, Haruto went home to visit his mom for the rest of the day, before heading out in the morning to finally work his way toward his first gym battle. As he traveled the routes, he battled trainers, caught some more Pokemon, and made some friends. Every so often, he wondered if the woman with the green Pokemon had been real, or if he had dreamt it. And if it had been real, had her plan worked? Had he merged with his other self? He thought he would have felt something if he had, but had he felt anything when his other self was created? Whether dream or reality, corrected timeline or not. He found his way to Violet City without any more troubling emptiness or peculiar weather. Life was normal, and he was free to become the best trainer like no one ever was. As for Hanako, well, her story took a different turn. She wound up lost in the western mountains of Johto, and eventually she found herself wandering the tunnels of Mount Moon into the Kanto region. Yet, despite never returning to the correct path, Hanako never experienced the emptiness that Haruto did. Why? What is so special about Hanako, and how come she exists in Violet's world and not in Haruto's? Perhaps that is a story for another time. The end. Epilogue. A woman stood in a room all alone. Her back was to the door, and she faced a Pokédex resting on a table on the far side. The woman was speaking, and at first glance, one might expect she was recording a message. But if one drew near and listened, the whole scene would be a lot more peculiar. For the woman was not speaking as if simply delivering a message. She was having a conversation. She would speak and respond, as if someone were in the room talking back to her. Yet there was no one else in the room, and no other voice was heard. When the woman had finished, she crossed the room and deactivated the recorder on the Pokédex. Then she started punching various buttons and keys, getting the recording named and stored for whatever purpose such an odd, one-sided conversation might have been for. As she was wrapping up her work, the air in the room started to vibrate with energy. There was a green glow that started out as a speck and grew larger until the whole room was filled with the strange light. Then, out of that glow, a green Pokemon popped into existence and, beside it, a man in tattered clothing. The woman pushed the last button she needed to save the file on the Pokédex and then looked up at the sudden arrivals.
Is it done?
With a face wrapped in ragged scarf, it made it hard to recognize the man's single nod. Seeming to notice the answer had not been conveyed, he decided to speak it as well.
Yes, Professor.
Excellent. Another step to put right all that has gone wrong.
Walking over to a set of shelves, the woman started to search for something.
After my actions split the timelines, I tried to mend it as early as I could. I thought I understood what was happening. I should have known better, of course.
The woman suddenly spotted what she was looking for.
Here it is.
She proceeded to pull down a small gift box, opened it, and placed the Pokédex inside. Once it was resealed, she started writing a note on the tag.
You see, if my efforts to change time caused a new version of Haruto to show up, then that must have meant it was the new timeline. So of course Hanako would be free to do whatever she chose. Unfortunately, that meant anything she did that was different from what Haruto would have done, had he continued to exist, would change everything. And it has. The entire path is taking on a shape so far from the original version of events.
With the tag filled out, the woman stepped over toward the man who had simply been watching the woman as she spoke. The green Pokemon had been flitting about the edges of the room, looking out windows and examining trinkets.
One of those consequences was you. I really am sorry about that.
The woman handed the box to the rag man.
So we must keep up our efforts to correct the course of time. For Haruto's sake, for Violet's sake, for the whole world.
Looking down at the box he was given, the man examined the tag, then looked up at the woman, questions in his eyes.
He was an old partner of mine. He will need the message I recorded on this. Changing that man's heart will go a long way in fixing the world.
The woman waved over the green Pokemon.
Epoch will know exactly when to take you. Then it is up to you. Don't be seen. Don't let him know you brought it to him. He is stubborn and proud and will not accept a gift from someone like you. But it is imperative that this ends up in the possession of Professor Thistle.
They stared at one another for a long moment, the woman trying to convey the importance with a gaze while the man searched for any hidden secrets.
Can you do it?
Another single nod from the man.
Yes, Professor Evergreen.
To be continued.